At 95, Clint Eastwood finally tells the truth about Rob Reiner. Clint Eastwood was born Clinton Eastwood Jr. on May 31st, 1930 in San Francisco, California during the Great Depression. His early years were filled with lots of moving around as his family looked for work all across California. This kind of childhood where they move a lot taught him to take care of himself and to be quiet about his feelings. Eastwood was a shy, thoughtful kid who liked watching more than talking. These qualities would later show up in the characters he played in movies. Music was important to him from a young age, especially jazz and playing the piano. This love of music taught him about rhythm, mood, and keeping things simple. These lessons would later help him when he made his own films. After finishing high school, Eastwood worked many different jobs like being a lifeguard, cutting down trees, and working at a gas station. These jobs taught him what regular working people's lives were like and made him respect hard work and toughness. He didn't plan to become an actor right away. It happened slowly, almost by accident, after he left the U.S. Army and started looking for chances in Hollywood. Eastwood's first years trying to be an actor were full of people saying no and not knowing what would happen. Universal Pictures signed him in the mid-1950s, but then let him go after small roles didn't make the bosses happy. They said bad things about how he looked, his voice, and said he wasn't interesting enough. Instead of giving up, these hard times made him stronger and more determined. He kept learning about acting, taking tiny roles, and waiting patiently for a chance that would let him grow instead of making him change who he was. That chance came in 1959 with the TV show Rawhide. Playing Rowdy Yates, Eastwood got steady work, and people started knowing who he was over 8 seasons. Even though the role gave him money and made him known, he felt like he couldn't be creative and wanted better parts. He was brave enough to take a big risk by leaving American TV to work making movies in Italy. This would change his whole life and change movie history too. In the mid-1960s, Eastwood took a job that didn't pay much in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy. These were a fistful of dollars for a few dollars more in the good, the bad, and the ugly. These movies completely changed Western films and created Eastwood's famous character, the man with no name. This character was quiet, not clearly good or bad, and didn't talk much. But his stare and presence said everything. Eastwood's acting changed what it meant to be a man in movies. He wasn't loud or talked too much. Instead, his strength came from holding back, just being there, and suggesting things without saying them. These movies becoming hits made him a star around the world and changed forever how Western movies looked and felt. Even more important, they gave Eastwood control. Control over what movies he chose to do, what creative choices he made, and being his own boss professionally. Coming back to Hollywood in the late 1960s and 1970s, Eastwood became one of the biggest stars who made lots of money for studios. Movies like Dirty Harry made people think of him as tough and as someone who enforced justice without backing down. The character Harry Callahan caused big arguments. Some people praise him as showing how mad the public was about crime. Others criticize him as representing too much power and control. But Eastwood always said no to simple explanations. He insisted his characters showed complicated morals, not political ideas. During this time, Eastwood showed he could do many different kinds of movies. He was in westerns, action movies, thrillers, romantic dramas, and funny movies. Films like Play Misty for Me, High Plains Drifter, The Outlaw Josie Wales, Every Which Way But Loose, and Escape from Alcatraz showed his range and that he was getting more confident directing movies too. He wasn't just acting anymore. He was learning, trying new things, and quietly getting ready for his biggest change yet. As a director, Clint Eastwood created his own special style. His movies were simple, kept emotions controlled, and showed deep respect for actors. He liked doing just a few takes, using natural light, and telling stories without doing too much. This let actors perform naturally and stories happen without extra stuff. His films often talk about getting older, feeling sorry about the past, making up for bad things, violence, and what happens when you do wrong. These topics weren't usually handled so carefully in regular Hollywood movies. His best work as a director came with Unforgiven in 1992. This was a Western that broke down the myths about heroes and violence that had defined this kind of movie. The film won Eastwood Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Picture. This proved he was one of the greatest filmmakers of his time. After this success, he made an amazing series of movies that critics loved. These included Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, Letters from Iwo Jima, Gran Torino, Changeling, and American Sniper. His praise and recognition go way beyond Hollywood. Eastwood has won 3 César Awards, one of Europe's most important film honors. This shows the deep respect he gets from movie people around the world. Because of how much he influenced American film, he also got the American Film Institute's Life Achievement Award. This honor is only given to artists whose work has really shaped what cinema means in the United States. In 2000, Eastwood's importance to movies worldwide was proven when the Venice Film Festival gave him the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement. This is one of the most respected honors in international film. This award celebrated not just single films, but all his work that showed complicated morals, controlled emotions, and a special way of directing that stayed powerful even as he got older. France, a country famous for loving film as art, has given Eastwood their highest civilian honors twice. In 1994, he was named a Commander of the Ordre des Arts et des Lettres. This recognized his amazing contribution to the arts and his influence on culture around the world. More than 10 years later, in 2007, he got the Legion of Honor, France's most important decoration. This put him with a small group of world figures whose accomplishments go beyond countries and generations. Altogether, these awards show an artist whose influence isn't limited to any one country or time. His legacy keeps inspiring and defining cinema all over the world. Clint Eastwood's marriage to Margaret Maggie Neville Johnson was the longest and in many ways the most complicated romantic part of his life. They met in 1953 when Eastwood was still struggling as a young man with no clear path to being famous. Back then, he was working lots of different jobs, including being a lifeguard and a worker while trying to get acting opportunities without much luck. Maggie Johnson was calm, smart, and steady. She meant stability during a time when Eastwood's future was uncertain. They got married on December 19, 1953, starting a marriage that would last more than 30 years. In the early years of being married, Eastwood's career was slow to happen, and not having enough money was always a worry. Maggie was very important during this time. She gave him emotional support as Eastwood dealt with being rejected professionally over and over. When he finally had his big breakthrough with the TV show Rawhide from 1959 to 1965, their lives changed in a big way. Being famous brought money, people knowing who he was, and opportunities, but it also brought problems that would test their marriage for years. As Eastwood became more famous through his famous roles in Sergio Leone's Man with No Name trilogy, and later as Inspector Harry Callahan in the Dirty Harry movies, his busy work schedule and growing independence changed how their relationship worked. Maggie mostly stayed away from the Hollywood spotlight. She liked privacy and a quieter home life. This difference between Eastwood's public life and Maggie's private nature became more obvious over time. The marriage had long times when they were apart and affairs that were well documented. Eastwood later admitted to these openly. Even with these difficulties, the couple stayed legally married for decades. This showed both complicated emotions and a shared sense of responsibility toward each other. Maggie and Clint had 2 children together. Kyle Eastwood, born 1968, became a successful jazz musician. Allison Eastwood, born 1972, became an actress and filmmaker. Maggie's love for her children and her work to keep the family together were the main parts of her role during this time. In 1978, after 25 years of marriage, Maggie and Clint officially separated. But their divorce wouldn't be final until 1984. The long time between separating and divorcing showed how deeply connected their lives and money were. When the divorce was finalized, it was one of the most expensive divorce settlements in Hollywood at that time. This showed Eastwood's huge success and Maggie's long role as his wife during his rise to fame. Even though their marriage ended, Maggie Johnson is still a key person in Clint Eastwood's personal history. She was there before he was famous, lived through the pressures that came with fame, and raised their children mostly away from Hollywood's wild side. Their relationship, though not perfect, shaped Eastwood's understanding of family, responsibility, and the personal price of wanting success. At 95, Clint Eastwood speaks with a clearness that only comes from living a full creative life without needing to make everyone happy. Looking back over more than 70 years in Hollywood, Eastwood thinks not only about his own career, but about how the industry's attitude has changed and the people who represent those changes. When asked about Rob Reiner, Eastwood doesn't speak with anger or meanness. Instead, his words are careful, thoughtful, and based on a belief that Hollywood has moved away from its original purpose of telling stories that bring people together instead of pushing them apart. I've never had a problem with Rob as a filmmaker. Eastwood says, he's talented. You don't make the movies he's made without understanding character and timing. Eastwood recognizes Reiner's accomplishments, especially his early work that focused on humor, warmth, and human connection. To Eastwood, those films showed a time when Hollywood wasn't so focused on showing off beliefs and was more interested in making good movies. What bothers Eastwood, though, is what he sees as a change, not just in Reiner, but in the culture around him. Somewhere along the line, the business stopped being about curiosity, Eastwood thinks. It became about certainty, and certainty is dangerous in art. In Eastwood's view, Reiner has become a symbol of a Hollywood group that doesn't accept disagreement anymore. They mistake being sure they're right about morals for being better than others morally. Eastwood compares this with his own way of making films and living publicly. I never believed my job was to tell people what to think. He says, my job was to show people who they are. He explains that his films, even the ones that cause arguments, were never meant to lecture audiences. They were meant to make people think. Whether directing westerns, war films, or close character studies, Eastwood says he trusted viewers to decide for themselves what things meant. According to Eastwood, the real difference between him and Reiner isn't about politics, but about how they think. Rob wants to win arguments. Eastwood says, I want to ask questions. He argues that Hollywood used to do well because of creative disagreement. Artists with completely different worldviews work together without demanding everyone think the same way. Today, Eastwood believes that spirit has worn away. There was a time when you could disagree and still respect each other. Eastwood remembers. Now disagreement is treated like a moral failure. He suggests that Reiner's loud activism shows a bigger trend, where entertainers confuse being loud with being virtuous. To Eastwood, being sure you're morally right closes doors that storytelling should leave open. Eastwood is careful not to act like he's a victim. Nobody's silencing me, he says. I've had my say. What worries him is a younger generation of filmmakers who feel pushed to agree with approved opinions. They're scared to be honest, he says. And fear has never made good art. When asked whether he thinks Reiner understands his criticism, Eastwood pauses. I don't know, he admits. People hear what they want to hear. He stresses that his comments aren't personal attacks, but thoughts about a system that rewards outrage over insight. Rob didn't create that system, Eastwood says, but he's comfortable inside it. At 95, Eastwood doesn't want to settle old fights. His tone is calm, almost disconnected. Life's too short for grudges, he says. What stays important to him is legacy, not awards or box office numbers, but the freedom to tell stories honestly. I'd rather make a movie that makes people uncomfortable than one that tells them they're perfect. In the end, Eastwood's truth about Rob Reiner isn't a shocking reveal, but a sad observation. It's the sadness of an artist watching an industry trade curiosity for conformity. Hollywood used to be a place where outsiders belonged, Eastwood says. Now it's a place where everyone's trying to prove they're on the inside. For Clint Eastwood, that change matters far more than any single name.